imagine are asking, why cheese? And we will answer that. But the way we'll answer that is by explaining how we got here. When we started this commission, we were commissioned to be heritage architects. Anyone in the room know what that is?
No, nor did we. Because we're artists and we've always introduced ourselves as artists who make art, but we were commissioned here to be heritage architects.
And actually we've discovered what a heritage architect is, and I hope that we can demonstrate to you tonight what it is. We have created a series of spaces, physical spaces, in an already physical space. So within this church we've exhibited works, and those works, those pieces, are stories, and we're talking about the architecture of people's memories, people's minds. And we're talking about heritage. So for us, we believe that what we've been doing is creating an architectural space for you to explore in your mind about your local heritage. And we believe that our role as artists and as heritage architects has been to trigger you as a community into thinking more about who you are, how on earth you got here, why did you end up in this place, and where are you going? That for us is a really important series of questions. And that's what we tried to pose with each work.
So we decided not to make 3 exhibitions exactly where information was presented. We wanted to make 3 exhibitions that asked questions and created a dialogue. And I think all of you here tonight are a really good example that that's worked. We've got this amazing dialogue going on about what makes Halton Halton, what makes Widnes Widnes, or Runcorn Runcorn. This is the dialogue that we've been having throughout the 3 exhibitions that we've done.
And indeed, the twain have met.
The twain have met.
Widnes.
We got met the same
several times. It's happened. And we know that that's a challenge sometimes, but it's happened, which is great. So the first work that we made was looking back at some of the heritage of the chemical industry. And what we wanted to do was not necessarily explore the areas where most people have explored historically here, but thinking more about the migrancy, the movement of people. Because this place, and this we'll touch on at the very end, before the chemicals and chemical industry came here, this was farmland. There were very few people living in this community, and suddenly an enormous wave of people from different places, different countries, came here and started working here. And we wanted to explore that and ask the question, of you. So who's your grandfather? Who's your great-grandfather? Why did they come here? And in doing so, we created a series of works that were exhibited here.
So this was a really natural place for us to start, because in trying to understand a place, and actually it's significant, although Jono's family actually does have heritage here, but it's significant that we're not from here, because we're then able to be detectives and ask questions and investigate. So the natural place to start was by asking everybody that we met here, how did you end up here? Who are you? What's your heritage? And there's a lot of interesting history in Halton, and there's a lot of interesting history as to why people came to work in Widnes, in those factories which were not desirable factories to work in, because conditions where they were living previously were far worse. And so we had that migration, particularly from Eastern Europe, from Ireland, coming here and creating what we now think of as Widnes.
And so we reflected on that process of casting and metal casting and foundries, which are very local to here. It's a foundry across the road historically. And a lot of those workers, they came and worshipped in this church. A lot of the Catholic workers, obviously, all the Catholic workers came. And so we looked and explored that through a series of core samples. And we made sand castings with people, which is a process that they use for foundry work. And so the first exhibition was that. And then the second work we wanted to explore was the whole story of transport and the focus on the Merseyside and that space where the Manchester Ship Canal is, and the canals. And so we looked at a piece that we called the Rope Walk, where we were looking at all of the industry of boat making and sail making and rope. And so there's parts of these 2 exhibitions behind you over there, and you'll see some of the rope that we made. And we had the amazing privilege of working with Frank's parents, grandfather or great-grandfather? Both great-grandfather and grandfather. An original rope making machine, over 200 years old, and we restored it after it not being seen working for about 60 years, is that right? And we had it running in an old rope walk in Runcorn, so we had a Widnes machine working in Runcorn, and we had people from Widnes come to Runcorn and make rope, which was wonderful. And the rope you see here was made by the whole community. It was wonderful.
And what's really beautiful as well about the way that we've kind of investigated this area is that with each of the 3 exhibitions that's ended up here in St Mary's, we've actually started off with it on location somewhere. So the rope walk was set up on the original line of a rope walk, the exact location of a rope walk, which is no longer there. It's a park now in Runcorn, but it used to run down by the lock of the series of locks, the flight of locks. And people would have walked up and down making rope just as we did when we recreated that. The core samples that we made, we did a workshop at Catalyst. So we were in the heart of the place where all of the trains and the canals and the River Mersey, where they all came together, that hub. And that's where we created a lot of those core samples. And so...
and one of our first meetings with a wonderful woman called Diana Leach, over there, I believe, hiding. Oh, she moved. She's hiding over there. There you are.
There you are.
So we had a wonderful conversation with her in Catalyst. Obviously, you run many moons with Catalyst and knew much about it. But what was wonderful was that when we came to talking about the final piece, which was about the rural trades, we wanted to explore something that would be a trigger for the heritage of the rural trades. And first of all, you mentioned the Daresbury group, and so there was a lovely group that we met with. We had a meeting with them. And
once we found the right pub.
Once we found the right pub, we did go to... Doesn't matter. We went to two or three before we found the right one. Anyway, we found it, and we had a nice ale, and we discussed the rural trades. And in that, Sue from Daresbury Group mentioned this story about this lovely, almost like a love letter back to True Love, saying thank you for the Cheshire cheese you sent while they were working in London. And we started exploring this idea of Cheshire cheese and that being a fuel for industry, you know, the thing that kept people alive and working, when it was a cheese that supported the war effort and the soldiers. So it was a really nice symbol, but don't get distracted just by the cheese. When you look at these leather plates, you'll see there's lots of industries here. We talked about the tanneries and the breweries and cheese making.
So we've got, there's 12 rural trades represented in the 12 plates, and I don't know whether you noticed, but the cheeses all have tags on them, and the tags are a poetic reference to what's written on the leather plates that talk about the industries. In fact, even in this setup itself, we've got the rural trades. These are World War I trestles that were commissioned from blacksmiths all over the country to be used in the war. They all date from about 1914. They're stamped with the original date. The board itself, so that's the blacksmiths. The board itself represents a number of industries. First of all, you've got the sawyers, who were the sawmills where they had a saw pit, and you'd get 2 people with the bow saw working along and creating a plank. Secondly, we've got the coopers, who were making barrels. Of course, we've got the amazing canal system here,
Shipbuilders.
And the shipbuilders using the planks, using the timber. And then the leather, the tanners, as you said. So we're combining all of these, but with each installation, we've taken one thing to use as a metaphor for the others. So in the first case, we looked at the soil of the earth. In the second case, we looked at the rope, and in the third case, we looked at the cheese. And I think when you listen to Paul and Sarah talking about their passion for cheese and their knowledge of cheese, that for me is really symbolic about rural trade. It's about fueling industry.
Yeah.
So it's about one person with a passion to do the thing they do, providing and enabling everything else to happen.
And it's a life of your work. Your life is completely the making of the things that you do. So all of these trades, people would have worked in them, their families would have worked with them. It's not a thing we're familiar with now. You know, as we speak to the next generation, they're all wanting to do the next thing, which is probably be a TikTok pro or on YouTube, whatever it might be. Actually, we're losing that connection to the making of things, and it's really important for us as artists, as much as anything else, as a little creature. We're obsessed with that reconnection with materials and process, and the understanding of the value of the things that are made, things that are around us. So we wanted to celebrate that and reflect that back to you, and celebrate your heritage, because it is your heritage. This is part of your history. And the question, again, why the cheese, why the rural trades? As I nodded to at the beginning, before all of this stuff happened in this place that changed the colour of the water different times of the day, you all know those stories, and sometimes your clothes fell off if you went in them because they started to rot, all those things. I've heard amazing stories about this place, and the Gallagher. Before that, it was a place where only farms existed, just people growing things. And so we wanted to celebrate that too, and remember that.